Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Sales Entrepreneur Podcast. I am Daniel McComber, and with me today is Bubba Page.
Happy to be here, guys.
Good to have you, Bubba. So, Bubba, I didn't even know what title to give you because you had so many: entrepreneur, venture capitalist, almost
Father first,
serial
entrepreneur, and now investor.
I love that. That's awesome.
I'll take all three.
Kind of like micro influencer.
You could say that too.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. Well, honestly, going to school like I did and for venture capitalism and entrepreneurism, I was actually introduced to you pretty early. One of my professors brought you up, I think, and I can't remember if I read something or watched something that you put out, but what I really appreciated was how much content and how much information you put out there. It's really impressive because the venture capitalism world, I mean, I guess now it's starting to get a little bit more, kind of popular, but it's usually kind of like its own secret society, isn't it?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It's very exclusive.
Yeah.
And I've taken the Gallup Strengths Finder. It's like the personality test. And my number one of all the characteristics is called includer.
Oh.
And so I have this really hard time to be in this exclusive industry and still act exclusive. I want to include everybody in what I do. And so technically not having a venture fund, it's an angel syndicate. I'm able to be almost inclusive with anyone so long as they're accredited investors.
Right.
So, I mean, that alone does make it somewhat exclusive. But
sure, but that's just for people's, honestly, well-being more than anything else.
That's true.
Well, I mean, what kind of gave you the idea of wanting to be in that space and structure the company the way you did so that way you could kind of include people and what's kind of the end goal behind that?
Yeah. So, I mean, first off, story started as an entrepreneur.
Right.
And so I built and sold a company, built and failed a company, and then built and cash flowed. And so multiple entities under one holding company.
Yeah.
I started angel investing in roughly 2015. Small checks, just to kind of like get a feel for it, but I loved it. And so as I started doing more and more of those angel checks, I would get friends that would be like, hey, why didn't you tell me about that deal? Like you and I co-invested in Gab Wireless together, right?
Yeah.
So they would be like, Bubba, why didn't you tell me about Gab Wireless? Oh my gosh, it was such a good deal. Yeah. And so they were asking me when I was in transition of like, okay, what am I going to do next? Bubba, go start a fund, go do a venture fund, go do it. I'm like, I don't know, guys. Like, I love investing. I love helping entrepreneurs. At the time, I just didn't feel like a fund was exactly what I wanted to do. So I heard about this syndication thing. I had invested through a couple syndicates already.
Yeah.
And essentially what that does is it allows me to create one special purpose vehicle, one entity, and I can allow any accredited investor to come in and invest with me. And then we, as a group, go into that, let's say Gab Wireless, as one entity. So that they only have one person on their cap table and they don't have to manage 10 or 20 investors.
Right.
I do that.
You do that on your side.
Yeah,
right.
And that's where the little tiny fees or carry comes in from an angel syndicate.
Yeah.
So when I found out about that, I was like, okay, that to me feels right.
Yeah.
It's flexible. I can do as many deals or not as many deals as I want. It is perfect for my lifestyle right now. I've got 8 kids. I want to be present with those kids.
Yeah.
To me, running a venture fund, it's like you are all in, more than all in, because you're managing all of these people.
Full-on company.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that person should be all in. So with the syndicate, it feels like I can be all in on a deal-by-deal basis, but that means I can do 4 deals a year or I can do 40 deals a year.
Right.
Just however active I feel like I can be. So the flexibility really played well. And then I love the concept of, I'm an investor in multiple funds.
Right.
So don't get me wrong. There's no shade on venture funds because I literally have invested in a venture fund. But having a syndicate, these investors that come in with me, they get to pick which investment they want to do. So when you invest in a fund, you're saying, hey, fund, take my money. Here's my $250,000 or $500,000, whatever.
Yeah.
I hope you put them in the best 20 companies you can.
Hope and pray.
But you don't get to pick.
Nothing.
So you just
control.
trust that they're going to pick 20 companies out of their portfolio and that you go with it.
Yeah.
With a syndicate, I just bring a deal by deal basis to my network and I say, hey, this is the deal I'm going to do today.
Yeah.
If you're interested, feel free, but you don't have to.
Love that.
And so one, I think it's a better user experience for the investor.
Yeah.
And I love the flexibility of it. To me, it's it's obviously still risky. It's still venture capital.
Sure. Yeah.
But it kind of gives me the best of both worlds, which
Well,
I've been happy about.
I'm interested, like, in that scenario, it sounds like if you were to come across an amazing company and you have a friend and the friend is like, hey, I love the idea of what that company is doing. Well, then you can say, oh, hey, well, join my syndication. Like, they don't have to be a part of the syndication for you to bring a deal to them per se.
No.
Right. So it could go both ways.
Yes. And then I'm able to, another thing about being inclusive is that a lot of venture firms are exclusive with other venture firms. So like if they're going to do a deal, they don't want the other venture companies to come in and do a deal. And I am totally the opposite.
Yeah.
So first off, as a syndicate, I don't want to lead a deal. Typically, I'm going to follow another venture firm.
Smart.
And so inherently, that means I'm going to co-invest with multiple investors, which is inclusive by nature.
Yeah.
So I love that because it's all friendly. I'm friendly with all the VCs.
Yeah.
I get invited into most of the deals I do because of the the expertise that we bring to the table, which is, the name is influence.vc.
Right.
Because we bring social media influencer expertise to each deal. So when we write a check into a tech company, then I can help give them the strategy, the playbook per se. This is how you work with these influencers. This is how you can blow up your business, leveraging influencers as one marketing tactic. There's obviously many others, but this is one key one that I think is getting more and more, prevalent.
Of course.
So that being a syndicate is less threatening to other venture firms. We're usually our average is a $500,000 check.
Oh, okay.
And so if it's a $2 million round, you've got a lead who's doing $1 million or $1.5 million, and I may come in and finish it with $500,000. Or they do $1 million and maybe a couple of angels, and then I come in and do $500,000, right?
Yeah.
So I'm almost always the last money into a deal.
Okay.
I love that too,
Yeah.
because that means if it took them 6 months to raise that round or 3 months to raise that round or whatever it took, I'm coming in at a higher valuation, even though it's still the same valuation on paper, because they've made progress over those 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, 6 months.
Yeah.
And I'm writing the last check.
Nice.
So there's strategy behind all of this.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. That's amazing.
And then I feel like I'm able to ensure the value of that investment slightly better than others because I can infuse revenue growth through influencer expertise.
Yeah.
And most VCs have their expertise in their own right, but typically it may not be directly impacting the revenue of that company.
Right.
And literally, if we do the strategy with influencers, they will have more revenue than before.
Bingo.
And that, to me, helps the valuation go up.
Yeah.
And the value of my investment goes up, and it's better for my investors, myself, all do that.
Absolutely.
I love to also write my own checks into every deal. So that's also a value add where most funds, their GPs, their general partners, they will have some percentage of the fund that they wrote themselves.
Yeah.
But these investors that come with me, they know that I'm writing a personal check in just about every single deal.
You got the skin in the game.
So my money is where my mouth is, right? I'm literally putting in money myself. I'm going to lose it if they lose it too. So I have every reason to pick the right companies and to work my buns off to make sure that I'm helping them succeed.
Yeah.
Because it's even more than just my own. I've got these other people's money too.
Well, that's a lesson I learned pretty recently, unfortunately. I invested in, it was kind of like a conglomerate of 3 different restaurants. And I invested in it. Well, the person I invested in with, I thought was heading it or had like a really big, was a GP. I thought he was like and sorry for general partner. I thought he was, controlling the ship a lot more. Well, then I come to find out later that he actually just was kind of syndicating money together, but didn't have any controlling options in the organization whatsoever. So that was the first time I've ever lost money on investing in businesses.
Keep investing.
I'm going to say I'm actually kind of glad though, to be honest, because it wasn't a crazy amount. And in venture capitalism, when you're investing in businesses, it's not a matter of if you're going to lose out on some of the deals. It's a matter of when, I'm guessing. Right. I mean, and so I'm kind of glad that I got one out of the way. I'm like, let's get them out now so that way as I continue to grow, it's not a huge loss in the future.
I mean, the idea behind venture capital and angel investing, just to kind of give tips, if anybody who wants to become an angel investor or if you're going to invest in a venture fund, a fund will invest in roughly 20 companies, typically.
A year?
Through the life cycle of that fund.
Okay. Yeah.
So if they raise $20 million, they're going to deploy into 20 different companies, but they do reserve capital to double down on the ones that do start to thrive. So part of that 20, let's say they invest 10 million into these, $500,000 at each company, and then they'll save the other 10 to drop like $1 million into the next round and $2 million in the next round. And so that's just kind of the really like basic 101 venture capital fund dynamic. They're betting on 1 to 2 of those deals going gangbusters and returning the whole fund. Home run, right? A third of them are going to be like base hits, right? First, second base type hits. A third of them are going to be break even. You may get your money back. And then a third of them, you're not going to get anything. It's gone. You've lost everything. And it may slightly trend higher in angel investing, that you may lose more just purely based on the lack of sophistication. So one thing that helps coming through a syndicate, if you do want to be an angel investor, going through a syndicate who has done a bunch before and who has the experience of doing this full time, you're getting similar value as a fund. I'm never going to say that I have the due diligence of a fund. I don't have a group of 20 people behind me running numbers, right? But we do our own level of due diligence, but then we follow along other investors. That's why they lead the round. They do the deep dive due diligence. We do our own multiple levels. But it allows an angel investor. Most funds take a minimum of $250,000 checks, or $500,000 check. So that's prohibitive. That's price prohibitive and exclusive by nature for most people to get involved in a venture fund. And so, as a syndicate, my minimum check size is $15,000. You can write a check for $15,000 and participate in the deals that I'm doing. That allows for inclusivity. So, because I know I have friends who are like, well, I've got $100,000 this year that I can put into 10 deals. I'm like, okay, well, that's $10,000 a piece. You got to be a little higher than that. So they'll write those checks at $15,000 and they'll be able to get into multiple deals. That's really interesting. Because as an angel investor, the strategy, why I brought this up is venture funds will invest in 20 to get those numbers that we talked about, right? Angel investing is very similar. And you may have a few more zeros again because of lack of sophistication. But you have to realize most will fail. The percentage of failure versus break even are more than 50%. And so knowing that, you have to be prepared. Whatever money you're going to write, whatever check you're going to strike, you have to be ready to lose it. I mean, and this is true for any investment, even if it's in real estate or oil or markets or whatever. Whatever you're going to invest, you have to know that there is a chance you can lose it. So be prepared for those losses. But you also, angel investors and venture funds, the best funds and the best angel investors are the ones who see the best deals. They see the most amount of deals. A lot of these angel investors who are doing it just kind of on the side for fun, they're only getting to see 5 deals a year, and they're writing checks into like 2 or 3 of those 5 deals. That's not many to choose from. I'm seeing hundreds and hundreds of deals, right? There are some venture funds that are literally reviewing 1,200 deals a year. And so 100 deals a month, and I'm getting at least that on a monthly basis. Based on my LinkedIn following, and I'm just getting bombarded all the time. Those are unfortunately just saying, at the bottom of my table, because I don't have a personal relationship with them or the person who introduced me. That's
what I was going to ask. If somebody wanted to like get in front of you, like, I have this amazing business idea. I've been cultivating it for a while. I guess LinkedIn probably wouldn't be the best way to.
No, absolutely connect me on LinkedIn, right?
At least it's a starting place.
Start connecting me there. But am I just going to take your pitch and like write you a check? Heck no. But connect with me there for sure. And then what I would do is find someone that you know that I know too, a mutual connection, and get introduced. By far, that's the best. Now, I have just opened up something recently because I get so many DMs, whether it's on Instagram or LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever. X. And I just can't. I can't get to those messages. And so if I am connected to you, there's a higher probability I may see it. But I opened up something on intro.co, which is you can book a time with me.
Oh, interesting.
Now, I don't love saying pay me money to pitch me your deal. I don't love that, right? Because I think inherently that's not the right culture I want to portray. Because I want people to be able to pitch me their deals and not feel like they have to write a check. But the reality is I will never see 1,000 deals a year
Yeah.
because I just can't get back to you. So if you want it that bad, if you want to pitch that bad, then book a time. You can spend it, whatever, it's $100 or something, and just book 15 minutes with me.
Yeah.
And let's see what it is.
I think it's a great idea, because I mean, you're giving people a chance that pretty much would never have a chance. Like, let's say someone from the East Coast or Texas, they look on LinkedIn and they don't have anyone within 3 connections or whatever. You got to get creative sometimes, but let's just say, hey, they're so invested into it and they want to know if they got what it takes. And I'm guessing maybe you do the phone call, you pitch it, and then if you decided not to do it, you probably give them a good reason.
Oh, absolutely. And advice.
Yeah. And advice.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And here's the thing, like,
paying for advice is sometimes extremely valuable. Like, sometimes
sure.
people can't even, they're not even in a position where they can pay to get advice. If they can get advice, maybe they'll pay some influencer or somebody, and you can't trust what they're getting. So for someone to be able to know, I can pitch Bubba and get advice from someone of his caliber, that's absolutely worth it.
No, I appreciate that. I think we did it in smaller increments, so you can do 15 or 30 or 45, 60 minutes. Start with 15 minutes. Just start there, see how the vibe goes. If I lay into you because you haven't prepared well, just be ready.
That's great.
Okay, because you're going to learn from it, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to try and give them as much insight. I mean, yesterday I spent, so I try to book out about 2 hours a week, and they're in 15-minute increments typically, maybe 30 minutes, some depending on what they book. But with people I don't know, right? These are the people who come in who are like, I can't get through his DMs. I don't have an intro, but I really want to get in front of this guy. You can book, okay? Yeah. The link is like intro.co/Bubba. Or if you go to bubbapage.com, there's a link there. Bubbapage.com. No I, P-H-E, bubbapage.com. There's a way you can book right there. But I spent a half hour with this group. Bless their souls. They're doing an AI company, which is great.
Yeah.
But I'm also seeing 90% of the deal flow is AI, which is fine. But if you're gonna pitch me what everybody else is pitching, you better be extremely different.
Right.
Have some value add. So when I came to the table and they were like, yeah, we're gonna raise $500,000 right now, and then we're gonna go straight to $100 million raise. And I was like, okay, tell me about this. And so they tried to explain, like, well, yeah, that's just the next raise. We're gonna raise this now, but like by January of next year, we're gonna do $100 million. So not $100 billion in valuation. They were going to raise $100 million in,
which means the valuation is
so the valuation has to be $500 million.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, you haven't gone out of beta yet.
Oh,
you have no customers yet. You have no traction yet. You don't even have a product working yet. Yeah. I said, look, yes, you've probably seen in Inc. magazine that somebody raised $100 million on their idea. I get it, but it probably was because they've already built and sold a $300 million company.
They have track records,
or they partnered with, who knows, Microsoft, and they're guaranteeing $10 million of revenue as a customer.
Right.
Or they've got some major background that's going to key in on people. So I just tried to help them understand, like, okay, look, what if you were to just scale it down slightly and focus on like what's more realistic? How can you back up that valuation? I mean, we can talk about investing all day.
Yeah.
But I love spending time with people. I love being able to help as much as I can. If it's not an investment type deal, and I have to remember, I'm looking at over 1,000 deals a year.
Yeah.
And so I probably won't invest in your deal.
Yeah.
But I do write checks into 10 to 20 deals a year. So what are the odds? What are the percentage of 1,000 deals and 10 to 20? You might be the one. And so it's worth a shot to try and get in through a connection or a network, or come to an event that I'm speaking at, or whatever it is.
That was exactly what I was going to say. So a couple things from that I wanted to hit on real fast. And if it's okay, I'll be a little vulnerable about this. So I don't think that people really understand that when you want to connect with someone, like, you really need to put in effort. Just sending DMs is not effort. So I wanted to connect with you, right? I had heard about you, and I want to be a venture capitalist in the future. I don't have a deal to pitch you right now. So, but I'm like, I might in the future. And that's another thing too, guys. You want to think preemptively, think ahead. And so I'm like, maybe there'll be a time when, I'm done doing what I'm doing and I want to be a venture capitalist, and I'll hit up Bubba and maybe you have some good advice. Sure. How do I get myself in a position where I have a relationship with this guy? Well, I went on LinkedIn and I sent you a message on LinkedIn. I'm like, this guy, I sent it. I'm like, this guy probably gets like thousands of these things all the time. And it wasn't LinkedIn, it was Instagram, right? Yeah. So I went to Instagram. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, podcast is in the name. We follow a lot of the same people. this is definitely going to give me a better chance, right? And so I sent you the DM, and I was like, man, that's probably still not going to work. I'm going to have to go find. So before you responded, I went and I messaged a couple of the people who we were mutual friends with. And I'm like, hey, do you know Bubba like well, or do you just know him through Instagram? And most of them just said through Instagram. But one person, I can't remember, I forgot to look, but one person was like, oh, I know him. I'm like, hey, could you make me an introduction? I'd love to have him on the podcast. And he was about to, but then you messaged me back, which I'm still surprised that you kind of did, to be honest. And we're here today. And the funny thing is, we rescheduled this 3 or 4 times.
I'm sorry.
And no, that's I'm not even local in Utah. Yeah, I'm not even local in Utah anymore. So the fact that we could make it work on a 3-day notice and whatever I come into town, but that's the point, is like putting in the work. I feel like not a lot of people ever hear examples of what it takes sometimes to get in the chair. And so
I'll add to that.
Yeah, from your perspective.
So yes, I get a ton of messages there, and typically I just can't respond.
Yeah.
And it's not feasible for me to respond to LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, all this stuff. But when you can add value to someone in some way, shape, or form, you invited me to be on a podcast. You know, do I do all of my invited podcasts? No, I don't. Scheduling just doesn't work. Hence, rescheduling.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
But I look at this as a place where I can hopefully share some experience that I've had, that I can help other people who are watching and listening. It's content that I can also share on my socials. So there's a win. Like there's a win-win here. And I'm not saying everybody go start a podcast per se.
Right.
But what value can you add to that person?
Yeah.
Because if you're really trying to get in touch with them, if you want them to be your mentor or advisor or invest in your business or coach you in whatever way, what value can you give that person? And that will increase your chances of success connecting. Because if you would have reached out, because people will reach out like, hey, I'd love to, what is the common phrase? I'd love to talk, take, oh my gosh.
Take you to lunch.
I'd love to take you to lunch. I'd love to, talk twist your ear for a minute about whatever this thing is. I'd love to.
Yeah.
That's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. So like, what value am I seeing? Like, there's, hundreds of lunch invitations.
Yeah.
Sure, free lunches are great, but that's an hour of my time.
Yeah, it takes a long time to get to the place,
absolutely,
eat, talk, and then leave. It's not a 15-minute lunch.
No. So every so often there's something that I call inspiration or promptings. And every so often there's something where something will come in differently, it'll hit me differently, and I'll go for it. But that's because I'm trying to listen to what God's trying to teach me, right? Yeah. And sometimes that takes this quiet space, no loud music, no, whatever it is, frantic, anxious day.
Yeah.
And if I'm in a place where I have felt something different about a message that comes in, then I might be able to respond to that one. And to me, it feels like, okay, what's the greater purpose here? There must be a greater purpose if I felt compelled to respond to this person, to connect with this person in a unique way. Now, when it comes to like LinkedIn and adding me on LinkedIn, add me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect with you. Am I going to set an appointment with you and take 15 minutes to an hour? Probably not.
Yeah.
But if you need to book that time, go ahead. And that I will save open that time each week, specifically for those. It's like a filtering mechanism.
Well, it's awesome. Yeah.
And then I can reach some of those people who are really interested in connecting. But the prompting side, I want to hit that for a second.
Yeah.
I think we go about our days so busy, whether we're an intrapreneur, like we were talking about before, or an entrepreneur, whether we're just working our jobs and we're just trying to take care of business or family. We go about our days and it's just so busy, so packed. Every hour is booked and scheduled. And then when we're not booked, we're scrolling, right? And we're distracting, or we're numbing out, or we're watching the show, or we're doing whatever. Yeah. To me, in order to be in a place where you can feel that inspiration, the hope is that you allow yourself quiet time. Yeah. So I would highly suggest for anybody that's listening, when you wake up in the morning, fill your soul with gratitude. I do that by saying a prayer. Nice. So I pray to my God and I tell him what I'm grateful for. And when I pray to God, I'm just speaking to a father. So it's like, hey, Heavenly Father. And I express this gratitude. I'm grateful I'm alive. Yeah. I'm grateful I got some sleep. I'm grateful I'm healthy, that I'm able to go and maybe exercise, which would be, post this moment. And I'm grateful for my kids. I'm grateful for you can go on for a long time talking about what you're grateful for. there are scientific studies that talk about when you express gratitude verbally, whether you're speaking to God or your higher power or whatever you believe in, there's different chemicals that are going on in your brain that are going to help you to have a happier day. After that gratitude that I try to express, then I fill some of that time with, what do I need? And I ask for help. I truly believe, whether you think it's the universe that's giving it back to you or a God, I think God's there for us. And he wants us to be grateful for what we have, but he wants us to ask. I need guidance and protection today. My son's struggling with something. I want to make sure that I can be inspired to teach him, tell him what he needs to hear, or I just need to be a listening ear. Let me be able to hear someone and have the empathy I need today. A lot of times I'll finish the prayer with, who can I help today?
Nice.
And so when I ask, who can I help today? And then I ask, how can I help that person? It may just be somebody I walk by on the road and I'll feel the inkling that I need to smile. That may be all it is.
Yeah.
Is just a smile to a stranger that changed their day for the better. Or it may be doing a podcast,
right,
and doing this whole thing, right? Like, and I don't know, you're making my day brighter, right? For being able to share some of these experiences that I hope that inspire people. And if we're trying our best to be good humans, we're treating people with kindness, we're being grateful for what we have. There's nothing wrong with setting goals and wanting to be a better person, to have more. I think that's fine.
Yeah.
It's when we blind ourselves with the vanities of the world, when we blind ourselves with the distractions and numb out, instead of taking time for deeper healing.
Yeah. Well, to add to that real fast, because I totally agree with what you're saying, is that what I've kind of harped on a whole bunch on this podcast before is, to kind of tie business into this idea of gratitude and vocalizing it. If you have like a business idea, or you are, unhappy with where you are, you can see a pathway out of it. Way too many people internalize that and they think about it all day long, but nothing is ever going to happen from you thinking about what you want to do or what you think you should be doing. And so people need to be vocalizing it as much as they can to anyone that'll listen, in my opinion, especially when we're talking about if you have a business idea. You should be vocalizing it to everyone. No one's going to steal your idea based on a 3-minute conversation, right? And what I think that does as well is, like you said before, it changes your brain a little bit. It changes your chemistry, where so much of what we do during the day is monotonous and it's the same. I made a post about it today. Like, it's the same thing. We do phone and then we do work. And so mixing up your day by doing something like a gratitude list. So I do 5 gratitude lists. I have like one person I'm supposed to send it to, an accountability partner, and for part of my coaching group. But I usually end up sending it to a whole bunch of people. If one of my employees is like, they get in the car or I hear that they're kind of negative, I send it to them real quick. And I do that every day. And it's the idea, like, listen, throughout your day, you're probably not going to do this again, right? This is the one time, usually in the morning, where you could do something different, because the idea of you doing a gratitude list at 7 p.m. is probably not going to happen. And so it's kind of ideas like, hey, if you can pitch your idea to one person a day, someone new a day, then that's kind of the same thing. It's like, hey, you're getting feedback from people. You're doing something different that you aren't doing the rest of the day. And I feel like that just helps with the brain chemistry, and then also your attitude. They've done so many studies about the attitude around it. For sure. But then being more specific with like a God, Heavenly Father, I don't even like using the term universe, but sure, universe, if that's your thing. The thing about that is that the humility part of it. It's like so much of what we do during our day is alone. And I don't care if you work with people, the thoughts that you have during the day are your own, and you suffer in your mind, right? And so I feel like so many people suffer in their mind. They're so alone with their thoughts and the things that they do throughout the day, that if you could take a couple minutes in the morning to say a prayer or to do a gratitude list, then you're getting out of your head, you're humbling yourself for something else, and you're able to kind of put yourself in a place to receive something in return, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. I also, talking about pitching your idea to everybody. First off, investors are never going to sign an NDA, almost never.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
So if you're going to pitch an investor, especially in venture capital, they're not going to sign an NDA.
Yeah.
Just recognize there's a difference between entrepreneurs, and wantrepreneurs. So the entrepreneurs are those who have millions of ideas, but they never execute. And you can change that by just executing, and you can be an entrepreneur, right? Or even if you're an entrepreneur and you're at a company right now, you have a job, you can make major differences within that company by thinking more like an entrepreneur inside the organization. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a great concept. Yeah. But when you are pitching, it's all about execution. Ideas are a dime a dozen. Everybody's got ideas. It's all about who is going to execute and who's going to execute best. Those are the winners.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking about an idea and you've had it written down, you've been sitting on it for years, what are you waiting for?
Yeah.
Right? Just do it. The worst thing that can happen is you fail. Guess what? I failed before. And yes, it's devastating and it hurts and it's painful.
Yeah.
So yeah, you got to stretch yourself. But so is working out. You've got to like tear the muscle to be able to build muscle. Yeah. So in order to grow, it's the same thing with entrepreneurship. It's the same thing with literally any aspect of our lives. We have to be willing to fail, learn from that failure, and then can get ourselves back up and keep going.
Yeah.
I teach my kids this when we go skiing.
Yeah.
So I have 6 eligible kids that I take skiing right now.
Wow.
My twins. So I have 8 kids. So 6 of them went with me last year altogether, me and just 6.
Wow.
And luckily, a few of the older ones are good. They're good on their own.
Okay.
I was teaching my 5-year-old, and he was like getting going. One of the biggest phrases that I've been teaching them is like, if you fall, get back up and keep going. Now, one thing I want to add a caveat to that I turned 41 this month, which is kind of crazy.
Oh, nice.
Which is awesome. But for 40 years of my life, I've been suppressing emotion. I've been just like, if I get hit with emotions, I've just been putting them in, looking at the glass half full and just plowing ahead. I think that was part of the generation that you just pick yourself back and keep going, because literally I'm teaching my kids the same thing.
Well, it's typical kind of like salesman mentality, business mentality. Like
rejection, keep going.
Rejection, keep going.
So, but what I've noticed now is, especially from an emotional health standpoint, a mental health standpoint, being able to recognize when you are feeling feelings, and as men, we hide them as much as we can. But to be able to dig deep enough to understand, okay, where was that trigger coming from? Why am I feeling this way? Why am I anxious? Or why am I depressed? Or why am I feeling? and recognizing where it's coming from, and then allowing that emotion to come up from the depths of your soul, and having a good cry. Like literally, we don't cry enough. I think as men, we try to be tough. We're trying to get, we're working out and we're trying to take care of the family and be protectors. All those things are true. We need to be.
Yeah.
But there's also an element of our lives that if we are not being vulnerable enough and humble enough to acknowledge our own weaknesses, then how are we going to ever get better?
Yeah.
So let's say we have these emotions and we are not willing to express them. That's going to come out in your romantic relationships too.
Absolutely.
And there's going to cause that vulnerability breeds connection. It happens in the workplace. So if you're a boss and you're trying to drive connection with your employees, with your teammates, vulnerability is the key. If you're in a relationship, vulnerability is the key. That vulnerability, obviously within a safe space, and you hopefully can be a safe space for others. Yeah. But you're only going to be safe if you've been able to take care of your own emotions. Because if you react or are triggered by emotions from other people, they're going to feel unsafe, and they're not going to want to be vulnerable with you anymore. So it's this tightrope to follow. But I would just suggest, if there are men that are listening right now, specifically, and I know women have to deal with emotions and process emotions too, but I think men struggle a little bit more. Yeah. Take time. I've been doing breath work. I've been learning about meditation. Meditation to me and prayer are very similar. Yeah. But there's guided meditations. This breath work concept is interesting, where it's not just like laying down and breathing calmly. It's like heavy breathing.
It's a lot of work.
It's like an exercise.
Yeah, it's work.
And I look at also, I have a sauna, and I love the sauna because it's like I'm sweating profusely. My heart rate can get up to like 130. It's like I'm exercising sitting in a sauna. Yeah. Same thing with a cold bath, right? Your heart rate skyrockets, and it's like almost an exercise. Yeah. This breathwork concept is very similar, where you're breaking into a piece of you that hasn't maybe been seen in a few decades. Yeah. And allowing you to get out, and maybe you in a safe environment, maybe by yourself, in a car or in a bedroom, whatever. Maybe you got to scream some things out. Maybe you got to let it out. As men, sometimes we just got to let it out. Maybe you got to, punch a pillow. I don't love the violent acts, but sometimes you just got to scream and let it out. Yeah. If you're in a car by yourself, that's a good time where you can kind of let it out. But I noticed if I'm struggling with something, If I do that for, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 minutes, enough, truly letting it out, whatever rage or feelings you have inside, however ugly it sounds or is, letting that out. Journaling is a really good one for me too. Just letting it out. It should be burned. I don't want anybody to see it. Journal it for. That the true emotion comes out after a few minutes, and that true emotion for me is I just start to sob, and I'm talking like ugly cry. I'm talking snot all over my face, like bring a towel kind of a cry. But that is where I felt layers of healing occur. But it's only when I dig so deep that the raw feelings can come out. And I preach on this topic because too many of us are dealing with the stresses of the day. We're trying to provide for our families. We're trying to compete in the workplace. We're trying to build a business. We're trying to, do something on social. We're trying to, whatever it is, we're trying to be everything to everybody. And when was the last time you sat with yourself? And we're distracting ourselves. We're, filling our days so full. When was the last time you were in nature? When was the last time you communed with God? When was the last time you wrote in a journal? Like truly depth, writing. Or when you pled with God. Not just thank you, great, thank you, God, I'm good. But deep feeling. And when I think we get this level of this deeper healing to occur, then we show up 100 times better for our kids, for our spouses, for our bosses, for our employees. Because if we're in an emotionally regulated environment for ourselves, we've learned to deal. The triggers are typically coming up because there's an insecurity. If you've been able to process these insecurities, build them up to become secure, you're not going to react or respond to somebody in a way that is like a fight flight. You're going to be in a more regulated state. That breeds confidence with other people. You become a better leader. You become a better spouse. And I think in that calm environment of emotional regulation, you're able to also hear the voice of God better. Because remember, in that triggers of whatever it is are deep insecurities that are within us. And if we can heal through Jesus, and some of these practices help, the breath work, the meditation, the prayer, the journaling, the men's retreats, whatever it is, those pieces heal, but truly it's Jesus that heals. He's the true healer. Those pieces combined can allow you to be the best human you can be. Self-reliance is one of those missions that I felt prompted, inspired. Self-reliance, and I want to teach and preach self-reliance to people through entrepreneurship and investing. I believe the more people are self-reliant, the more abundance that they can share. And when you have an abundant mindset, you help other people more. It makes the world a better place. And obviously fatherhood. I've got 8 kids. So this is kind of a multiple faceted approach. I hope that the messages that I can bring to people become the person you were meant to become. Learn who you were before this world. You are a child of God. You are a direct descendant from a divine being. And so you have a great work to do on this earth. Find out what that is. Deep meditation and personal revelation to find out what is that mission you have on this earth. And I think a big part of that mission for men and for women, it is fatherhood and it is motherhood. What greater calling on this planet can we have than fatherhood and motherhood? We are bringing these children that are on loan from God to us during this earthly mission. Our job is to be their most inspired, element. We direct.
And that's the message that needs to be told a lot more right now. Right? I have 2 kids, not 8, but and so that's the thing too. Is I see more and more people who stand out and give a message like, hey, fatherhood and motherhood needs to be praised through messages like this. It's going to help people. Again, it's not just finding a good solution to live this life, right? You don't want to just live this life and you don't want to just make money. It's kind of one of those things where if you could make money but lose your soul, then what have you really gained, right? And so that's kind of the idea is hey, if you can find out what your, I don't want to say purpose, but what your talents are that you're blessed with, what your skills are, the things that you're passionate about. And that all comes from your upbringing, right? It comes from who you were as a child and as a toddler, as a teenager, all these things molded you into a very specific and unique person. And you have specific talents and skills that other people don't have. Use those, right? And so I don't mean to deter from the message that you're just saying, but going back a little bit, before this, we talked about a lot about those three different things: the entrepreneur, and intrapreneur. I think a lot of the people who I know, they call themselves entrepreneurs, but after I've learned what the definition of an entrepreneur is, I'm like, no, these guys are phenomenal. And I mean top of the top 1% entrepreneurs. And they don't even know it. They don't know how to label themselves because they're 1099, for example, and they're independent contractors and they do run their organization the exact way that they want to. But they're not entrepreneurs. They're entrepreneurs, right? And so the idea in my mind is like, hey, you are amazing at what you do. You have amazing talents. You have honed in those talents. You've put in hours and hours of work into making yourself the best that you possibly can be. I feel like having a recognition of that and who you are and what you're good at is sometimes lost with some of these people who aren't happy with where they're currently standing. Do you have any kind of opinion about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think typically when I think of the definition of an entrepreneur, they're an employee at a company, and that company is running, and they're a cog in that wheel, but they're able to function with an entrepreneurial mindset within that corporation. So they're able to think through. They're able to think through, like, how do I make this business better? Like an entrepreneur, how do I save money? How do I make money? How do I do that? Mm-hmm. When I think of maybe what you're referring to, there's a book called what is it called? Oh my gosh, Cash Flow Quadrant. I think Robert Kiyosaki. It's like old school.
Oh, right. Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah. So the author of Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's called Cash Flow Quadrant.
That's what it's called. Okay.
So yeah. So he basically labels the 4 types of people and where you want to be in order to create wealth. So you've got an employee. That's one. And then you have self-employed. And so I think you were talking about self-employed. So the employee is kind of the entrepreneur I was mentioning.
Okay, yeah.
The self-employed is somebody who is doing their own thing. They're 1099 and they've kind of have their own LLC in there. But without them, there is no business, right? So They have to be the ones running it. They're the ones doing it. Technically, even dentists would be qualify into this realm, because if they don't have hands and mouths, then they're not making any money.
There you go.
So self-employed. So it doesn't mean you can't make good money as a self-employed person.
Yeah.
But where you build wealth is as a business owner or an investor. Like that's where you level up. So being an entrepreneur, and let me clarify. I have a good friend of mine, like one of my best friends. We've known each other for almost 2 decades, and it's almost 2 decades. It's so crazy. Yeah. He and I were on these parallel paths. He was an employee, salesperson, and I was an entrepreneur. We'd go to lunch every month for years and years. And he would complain that he wasn't an entrepreneur, and I would complain that I didn't have the steady paycheck that he did, right, as an entrepreneur. And it was just this funny dynamic. We'd go back and forth, like, oh man, I wish I had, your salary this year. Oh my gosh, well, I wish I had the freedom of your entrepreneurship and you're building something. And years and years and years would go by, and he continued to earn a significant income as an employee. And mine took 3 years. It was like almost nothing, like barely made enough to make ends meet. Yeah. And then my income started to take off. But he had been making great money along the whole way. Yeah. Well, what he did is he lived off of much less, and he invested the rest. Where I was investing everything into my business. And what's so fascinating is that by the end, I was able to sell my company, and he was able to essentially retire because he had built so much investment income. As an employee, he would take the proceeds, and instead of buying a bigger house and a nicer car and bigger vacations, he invested these funds. So that cash flow quadrant, he was an employee, but guess what? He acted in the investor quadrant. Yeah. He was very smart and frugal, and he didn't need to keep up with the Joneses. He didn't need to have the nicest and greatest of the whatever. So he started investing, and that investing paid off to the tune of over $100,000 a month. He's getting an investment.
Dang, nice.
That's not bad, right?
Not bad. Easy to retire on that.
Yeah, no question, right? And it's steady and it's consistent. So I took the entrepreneur route, the business owner route, and it was a struggle, but we ended in a very similar place. He may even have higher net worth than I am now.
Yeah.
Because he was able to multiply compound interest over so much time.
A lot of time.
If I would have had a bigger exit, then maybe, right? But here's
Sure.
the funny thing. You know how he always wanted to be an entrepreneur? Well, guess what? He had the freedom, flexibility, and the funds to fund his own startup. So he started a company a few years ago, about 4 years ago. Is it 4? And guess what? He started building it on his own. He started building and getting a little bit of traction. So he comes to his friend and says, I think I'm going to raise a little bit of capital. Would you like to invest? Heck yeah, I want to invest. So now I'm an investor in his business.
Nice.
So now he's hitting that quadrant, right? So
Yeah.
and now he's built a business that's going to do close to 10 million in revenue here pretty soon.
Wow.
And that's a multiple. He can sell the business for $50 million.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like he has now he'll be phenomenal as an entrepreneur. Now he's been an investor. He'll always so I'm just saying there's not one specific way to do it.
Right.
You can be a killer employee and then just be smart with your money and put it away. And if you find the right types of investments and you strategize that process, he would read every investment book under the sun. We've since co-invested in a lot of our deals together. He came in a gab with me when I did that seed round, and others. But I'm just saying, so you can be an employee and still get that wealth as long as you act in one of these two. It's very difficult. So dentists, for example, and I just use them as an example, make great money.
Yeah.
They can make great money. The second they retire, if they retire without making these investments, they're going to have a much smaller, let's say, lifestyle than they would have been. Or some of them take their proceeds as a self-employed person and they buy other practices. Yeah. And now you're an investor or now you're a business owner. So you always remember where you build wealth is as an investor or a business owner. Yeah. The self-employed person and the employed person, they need to be smart with their finances and start dabbling in these two. And that's where the growth will really take place. The book is great. It's old, but it's good.
No, I love that. And the cool thing that we talk about with the entrepreneur, whether kind of like self-employed entrepreneur or what I like about that is that you can, if you get really good at what you do, you can get paid like your friend an amazing amount of money to the point where, hey, if the goal was to have financial freedom, then, hey, you did it without having to go through the struggles of like an entrepreneur. But like you said, the goal to wealth and long-term wealth is the investing part of it. And the funny thing is that I have done entrepreneurial ventures and they're small. And then I've also invested in, and mainly in investing. So I actually fall in that category right now currently, where I'm a shareholder in the company I'm at, and what I say does have an impact of where I am, but I didn't start the company. I'm not one of the founders. I'm not a CEO. And so, but because I'm good at what I do and I make good money, I then turn around and I invest in companies like the one we invested in. I invest in companies like the restaurants that I lost a little bit of money in. But then I also invest in other companies that are kind of like lifelong or lifestyle companies. And then, real estate and so forth. And so I really love how you mentioned that, because those top two are just the most important that you have to invest in and or to build wealth. Exactly. I love that. So I guess before I let you go, I'm kind of curious. So you've been on the entrepreneur side, you've been on the venture capitalist side. Which one do you think? I don't want to say is the most rewarding, but which one do you think has had like the greatest, I guess, impact on you and who you are?
For sure, as an entrepreneur. I mean, I was an entrepreneur for 20 years before I really became an investor. So that's kind of shaped me and who I am. And I think that's one of the added values as an investor that I bring to the table. Because some of these venture firms, they've never been an entrepreneur before.
Oh, really?
And so if they're giving advice to their portfolio company on to how to hire, how to fire, how to do, they're not doing it from the depths of an entrepreneur seat. And so I'll get phone calls from people who have raised from VCs, and they'll be like, Bubba, they're really nice guys and they're very strategic, but they haven't been in my shoes before. Oh. So can you help me? Like, how do I do this? How do I do that? Yeah. So I think being an entrepreneur is a great path. Not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur. Yeah. Just plain and simple. And that's okay, because everybody needs employees and everybody needs partners and team members. Yeah. But for me, being an entrepreneur shaped me because it was all about, one, I love to problem solve. So I love being able to create a business that solves somebody's problem. Yeah. And if you solve a big enough problem, then you can get compensated very well for that. But it's also just the gut-wrenching, horror stories of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
My VC-backed tech company failed.
Right.
3 years, blood, sweat, and tears. I had to shut it down. And like, talk about a trial to go through and feel, especially when, as entrepreneurs, sometimes we put our identity with that business.
Right.
And we have to be so careful with that, because I did it and I went into this like depression mode.
Wow.
And it was probably a 6-month time frame back in 16, 17, where it's like, I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel good enough. I felt like I was a total failure. And it wasn't until my investors, who put in all the money and lost the money, they came to me and said, look, Bubba, like, we know you worked your freaking tail off.
Yeah.
Like, you did everything in your power to make this business a success. Like, we don't blame you at all.
Yeah.
Like, there were macroeconomics involved in this.
Yeah.
It didn't pan out. We're okay with that. We'll fund your next business, whatever it is.
Wow.
And that level of confidence allowed me to realize, like, oh my gosh, I am not a failure. I am personally not a failure. My business did fail, but I had to recognize that, okay, I am not my business.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a new conference that's coming up called the Fail Fest, and I'm involved in it.
Oh, nice.
And it's all about people preaching their stories of what they learned through failure.
Wow.
Because I think, and a lot of people say this, that you learn more from your failures than you do your successes. Mm-hmm. Because you're more self-reflective and you're more,
absolutely,
you look inward more and like, why didn't this work? Or how this, and the pain.
Yeah. When
you feel pain, you're probably going to learn something from it.
And you're going to remember it years down the line.
Remember it, right?
Yeah.
And because when I got the wire for my company that I sold, I got it on a Friday, and then COVID shut down the world on Monday.
Oh. My
twins were born on Sunday. Like, I remember a lot more of my twins being born than I do the wire hitting the bank. Right? Yeah. Now, it was great timing, tender mercy that came in right before COVID. Yeah. But like, the reality is that what changed at that moment? Yes, I had a larger amount in my bank account, but like the rest of my life didn't change. When the business failed, it changed. I had employees that I was working with every day that I was no longer working with.
Yeah. You
know what I mean? Like, I had, it was like this depth of despair. I was trying to, so you definitely feel more, I think, when you fail.
Yeah.
And I think it's inherently, if you are an entrepreneur long enough, you will.
Yeah.
And that's fine. If you're an investor long enough, you will fail. That's just part of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that taking the risk component that sometimes you have to do it.
Yeah.
Though entrepreneurs tend to get freaked out because of failure. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case and you've never really taken a step in to be an entrepreneur, that's okay. Be a great entrepreneur at a company.
Right.
Or be a great employee at a company. Be so good at what you do that you make more than the rest of the people at the company.
Yeah.
This friend of mine was getting close to making the same amount as the CEO or the VP when he was a VP.
Yeah.
Because he was just so dang good at what he was doing.
Wow.
And then take the proceeds and invest in other things.
Yeah,
if I were to, one thing to kind of share is that I feel like with entrepreneurship, ideation is the beginning. Mm-hmm. So you come up with the idea. I preach that you typically want to start a company with some in the realm of your expertise. Okay. I have nothing to do with medicine. I'm probably never going to start a medical company.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's just not my background. I have no expertise. I have no knowledge. So if you have a certain expertise, and if you don't yet, and you're trying to find one, go get it. Go get some expertise.
Like, find a job that has something to do with the expertise, or study, I'm guessing. Or
okay, absolutely. Yeah. Study, go get a job, get some experience, do a course, get a certification, whatever it is. Because when you have that level of expertise, or even just experience within an organization or an industry, you will start to know what gaps are not being serviced well. So you can find, okay, I'm in the oil industry. Well, we always struggle with X, Y, and Z things in the oil industry. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Who's providing a solution to that struggle? No one. Mm-hmm. Oh, or there are 3 people providing it, but it's way too expensive. I could do it for cheaper or better, faster.
Yeah.
You're able to find these ideas should come from solving problems that you already know about. Mm-hmm. You'll have a much greater level of success. Then, I believe first-time entrepreneurs, you have a higher probability of success starting a services company versus a venture-backed tech company.
Nice.
When you start a services company, you can generate profit a lot faster.
Yeah.
And it is hard work, and you don't have the same multiples on an exit as you would a tech company. Yeah. But you learn the basic fundamentals of business. Mm-hmm. You understand what a P&L is, and what EBITDA means, and, what a net profit versus gross profit is. And as you start to understand the fundamentals. If you just jump all in on a venture-backed tech company, one, what is it, like 1% of pitches get funded? So you already are starting off on very poor odds.
Yeah.
But then you also have the false sense of having money in the bank. If people wrote you a check and you've got $500,000 in the bank, you're thinking, this is sweet. I'm going to buy new chairs. I'm going to get a sweet podcast set up. You're going to start spending money you don't have.
Yeah.
Because technically that money should be spent purely on getting customers, building the product, right? And so I see first-time entrepreneurs sometimes struggle if they have raised money on how to do it appropriately and how to be fiscally responsible and frugal. Yeah. So that's why I prefer, if I'm going to invest in somebody, I like a repeat entrepreneur.
Nice.
I will fund a first-time entrepreneur here and there, but like for the most part, a repeat entrepreneur is someone who's been there and done that. They've had some failures or they've had some struggles.
You're looking for someone who has failed.
I want someone to have
if they can succeed better. Experience, yeah. So whether the experience is failure or a positive, it's better than no experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, just because, and I'm not saying that first-timers can't get funded. You can. A lot of it's who you know. Yeah. But it also is what expertise you have. Are you building a company in an industry that you're an expert in? So, I funded this group called trycrew.com. They all left Divvy after Divvy was sold for $2.5 billion. Yeah. They were on the product team and they wanted to build, they kept hearing from their customers that their customers at Divvy wanted to have a Divvy for families. And, this is like an expenses tracker and mobile friendly app and a no cost software to build for their families and their kids. So after Divvy was acquired and their non-competes were up or whatever, they end up leaving and starting this group. They're first-time entrepreneurs. They've never done this before. Right. But they also were at a company that got acquired for $2.5 million.
They probably know what they're doing.
They probably have a good idea of building a good product. Yeah. So I had faith in a first-time entrepreneur because of where he had been and the experience of what he had done and how similar it was to what he was going to build. And so TryCrew today is a deal. TryCrew.com/Bubba. That'll give you an extra interest rate thing. There's my affiliate code.
There you go. Nice.
So they can track and say, hey, it actually came from Bubba, right?
Yeah.
And it's this, the ability for them to build a product, and it's a phenomenal UI UX because they know how to build product. Yeah. They just came out to a market, but I funded that deal not because they were repeat, because of where they came from. So that gives you kind of an idea of what I look for in investment. Everybody has their own unique pieces of the pie.
Well, you said this kind of earlier too. You were talking about the different things that you invest in, and you also said the different people that you invest in, because you hear this all the time, and there's a lot of answers to it, but you invest in the people just as much as the idea, or if not more than the idea.
More than the idea, for sure.
More than the idea, yeah. And so that's kind of why I love that we talked about as long as we did. Like, hey, there's one thing giving an elevator pitch to you, and then let's say that someone were able to book the call with you or do an elevator pitch, and you somewhat kind of like the idea. Is the next step to get to know the person or get to know the idea more?
I have to get to know the person. I just have to. But am I going to go multiple meetings just to get to know the person before I understand it? Probably not. So if it's somebody that's coming in cold without as much of an intro, the product is going to be the first look. Because if there is interest in the product, then I need to know, do I want to marry this person?
Marry them?
Yeah, because as an investment, I'm with them for 7 to 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
Think about it,
Which is longer than the average marriage, I think.
Yeah. And so, because really, as an investor, you know that it's going to take that long. For at least as early as I'm investing in, it's a 7 to 10 year window. Yeah. So I'm essentially marrying that person. And if they're a jerk, I'm not going to write them a check. Yeah. But I'm not going to see if they're a jerk if I'm not even interested in the product. And so if it's not coming from a relationship, yes, it would be product first. Yeah. I prefer relationships, interest. Yeah. But again, that's obviously not everybody can come through that. Yeah. So today, I came directly here from a lunch. No relationship. They got referred to me to a fellow investor. So that immediately puts them at a higher click on the list. Yeah. We do a phone call first. I'm able to understand a little bit of the business. I know some of the background of the business. And I'm interested in the space. So when we meet, we met for lunch for the second meeting today. I got to meet both co-founders. I'm getting to know them. We spent probably the first half hour at lunch, personal chat. Nice. Because I'm interested. I know I'm interested in the business. I feel like they've got great traction. They've already built a product just like this with phenomenal success. And they want to do it again.
Yeah.
So now I want to get to know them.
Yeah.
And so we spent half the meeting talking about personal stuff and making connections and all this, how you build a relationship.
Yeah.
And then the second half is talking strictly about business, right? Talking these numbers, let's get the brass tacks.
Yeah. It's got to be so hard when you get so many ideas, when you find one that you like and get excited about it, to not be emotionally invested in it. Because that's the thing, is like entrepreneurs have a track record of getting emotionally invested in the companies that they form, which is why I think that's why a lot of them fail as well, is because they make decisions that aren't right for the company or will not keep the company longer than it should be. So how as an investor do you help yourself from getting too involved, or not involved, but emotionally interested in some of the deals?
Honestly, I have so many deals I'm not able to. I just can't.
Yeah.
There's too many deals, too many meetings, too many people. I can't get too emotionally involved because of the quantity.
That's good.
And from a timing standpoint. So I can see an individual angel investor who gets those 5 deals a year, that they become emotionally involved. And if the business fails, they're distressed.
Yeah.
And that happens sometimes. For me, one, I want to help them as much as I can. But I'm helping them from a tactical logistical standpoint.
Yeah.
So from an emotional standpoint, I know not all these deals are going to work. Yeah. So I had a friend of mine, I love him. He was all relationship based. He was building a product I wanted to use. Yeah. So it worked. I wrote him a check for $50,000 as an angel.
Yeah.
Right. And I loved him for 2.5 years, blood, sweat, and tears. He did a great job on the product, but it I lost my $50,000. Yeah. I go directly to him. I love you, man. I totally get it. Nothing against you personally. I know you worked your tail off. Yeah. Be happy to look at your next business.
Reciprocating.
Yeah, because it happened to me.
Yeah.
Of course.
So
that's part of the ecosystem. If you're working with good people, you're gonna have that type of experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have to be aware, if you're going to raise money as an entrepreneur from like friends, family, fools, that is Dr. Dummies, those triple R companies. That's usually where you get your first round of funding from.
Right.
You have to be aware because they're not sophisticated investors, they're going to be emotionally involved. And if you lose their money, that's going to be an emotional experience. And
yes.
burn bridges and lose friendships or family members. Doing this as often as I'm doing it, at kind of the next years, you have triple Fs, triple Es. Then you're looking at angel investors and then venture capital and private equity.
Does it make it any different to you when you know that the investor is, let's say, all in? Let's say like it's their only, they have to make this business work, otherwise they can't feed their families? Or does it matter if they're, I don't want to call it a side hustle, but maybe they have another source of income, but they're still really devoted to this entrepreneurial venture? Does that make any difference, or is it case by case?
Yeah, so I'm a super fan of side hustles for people who are at a job and they're trying to start something. But if you are going to raise venture capital, you have to be willing to.
Right.
Because if I'm giving you money, it's not to keep. You have to be all in.
Yeah.
You're essentially, investors become your boss.
Mm.
Now they may not own the majority of the business yet.
Yeah.
But they become a boss. You need to report to them.
Mm.
You need to tell them what you're spending your money because it's their money.
Yeah.
You need to tell them who you're hiring and firing. You can they become a boss, and you have to recognize that if you don't want a boss ever, then just be your own. Do your own thing. Don't raise money.
Yeah.
Or go get a loan from the bank or something if you can.
Yeah. Do you ever see entrepreneurs that kind of lose some of their spark or passion once they realize, hey, we have these investors now that we have to answer to?
I think it depends on the relationship they have with the investor, and it also happens when they are struggling. So the business, they go raise money and they're off to the races, and then all of a sudden it's not paying out the thought. So now the relationship is strained with the investors. Now the relationship is strained with the employees they hire. Now the relationship is strained at home because the business isn't paying out. That stress level is what triggers things, right?
Yeah.
And that's what gets your deepest vulnerabilities and insecurities to the table.
Yeah.
And so, that is kind of the time frame where some of this happens. I think it's important to know that those days happen.
Yeah.
And that you have this roller coaster as an entrepreneur that's inherent. So when you ever ask an entrepreneur, how are you doing? And they're like, things are great. Yeah. It's like, how are you really doing?
Yeah.
Because they're going to say that to everybody around them because they don't feel like they're doing great.
Yeah.
But the reality is maybe they just missed payroll and they didn't get paid themselves because it's money. They didn't get their accounts receivable in time.
Yeah.
And that sucks. So they furlough people and they can off. Right. So the entrepreneurial journey is not a straight line. We all know that. It's all over the place, twists and turns, ups and downs. And it's being in a mental and emotional state of mind to where you can handle that level of stress. Again, it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
So long story short, side hustles are fantastic to test an idea and to get even try to get product market fit. It's a great way to build an MVP, the minimum viable product. It's a great way to talk to people about your idea and get feedback. The second you raise money, you got to be full time.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. You have to make that transition. No, I love that. Well, honestly, I feel like through this conversation, we get in someone who is trying to start out in entrepreneurism and maybe find funding, a lot of tools to know what to do and how to approach someone like yourself. And then even for those people who are looking to possibly be venture capitalists or want to know more information about that industry, we've also given them so much knowledge about that. So I really appreciate that.
Well, and if you want more, follow me. Right? Instagram, it's Bubba Page. LinkedIn, it's Bubba Page. Not too many on there.
Yeah.
X, I'm on there, but like LinkedIn and Instagram are my primary. You can do the TikTok. I never log in. Like the 19 posts for me there.
Nice.
So the relaying the content there. But connect with me on LinkedIn. Right? Feel free to send me a message. If you want to book time, you can book time at bubbapage.com. The syndicate, if you want to join to be an angel syndicate with me, you need to be an accredited investor, but go to influence.vc where you can apply.
Nice.
And there's a second segment where we can allow people to be on the newsletter list and things if you're not accredited, so you just can't invest. We can kind of keep in line and hear the content of social context.
Those are some of those first steps, right? Getting the knowledge, seeing what you're doing, and then hopefully that money will get there to the point where you can become one of those two wealth-building investors.
Absolutely.
Love that.
Thanks
Thank
for
you so
having
much
me,
for
man.
having me on. Appreciate your time.
Woo-hoo.